Good morning, everybody. So I wanted to discuss this binaural beat deal because I made a video, a meditation with binaural beats, and somebody talked about how there were some dangers and other people didn't know how it worked, so I didn't even know how it worked originally. So, I figured I could put this all together in an article, and that's what I want to do, is just read through that here today. So, what are binaural beats and how can they affect our brain? So listening to binaural beats can change the frequency of our brain into another state, and some people use them in order to relax more easily after an intense day at work, tap into their more creative side in order to solve a problem or work more efficiently, or even to plant affirmations into their subconscious to reprogram themselves. So you can see on the bottom right-hand side of the video the different brain waves. It starts out with gamma, which are very frequent and shorter, not as high amplitude as the other ones. And then it goes into beta, which again is a little bit less frequent but higher amplitude. And then alpha, a little bit less frequent, higher amplitude. And again, theta, and it just goes down to delta. And delta is the lowest and less frequent one, and that's when we are in a deep sleep. If our brains were constantly operating in a state of beta, we wouldn't allow our bodies time to relax and heal themselves. If they were constantly in a state of delta, we wouldn't be able to think properly or learn new things. Our brain waves are constantly changing, so you might wake up in a drowsy state from your dreams, which would be in theta or alpha state. But as soon as you started thinking about what you have to do that day, you'd end up in the beta state. After getting ready for work, you might get onto the highway and then just zone out. And that zoning out is called highway hypnosis or white line fever. And you might have dipped back into the theta brainwave state. It's sort of like a meditative state when you are driving for long periods of time and you can't remember what exactly you just did because you're kind of on autopilot. Then once you get back to work, there might be a very challenging project you have to work on. When you have to really use your brain for more difficult problem-solving tasks, you might end up in the gamma state. Once you get back from work, you become more relaxed and may go from the beta state into the alpha state. If you went home and switched on the TV, you would likely switch to alpha within a minute of watching it. Or if you meditated before bed, you might slip into alpha, theta, or delta there. When you sleep, your brain doesn't just stop processing, it actually starts to process more. You may end up in REM sleep and start dreaming, which would be the gamma state. When you become lucid in a dream, you may end up in the gamma state. Some researchers found lucid dreamers as high as 40 hertz. So, how do binaural beats work? A binaural beat, or binaural tone, is an auditory illusion that occurs when you are listening with headphones to two different pure tone sine waves, both with frequencies lower than 1500 hertz, with less than a 40 hertz difference between them. I found that interesting that it was supposed to be less than a 40 hertz difference between them. As far as the gamma state, if you're trying to induce that, some people do really high differences between the binaural beats. This is according to Wikipedia, and it could be off, but I'll just leave that there, and I still want to actually research that more because I'm not sure if it's really just 40 hertz difference and then nothing higher is going to work, but that's something else to look into further. This effect that the brain is creating this binaural beat was discovered in 1839 by Heinrich Wilhelm Dove. The word binaural means having or related to two ears. The bi portion, of course, is for the two. The oral portion is related to the ears. If you hear the frequency of 172 hertz on one side and 177 hertz on the other side through the headphones, your brain is making up the difference, 5 hertz. That is the resonating pulse you hear when you listen to them, when you have both headphones on at the same time. If you take off one earbud or headphone side, you'll just hear the regular tone in the other side of the ear. And of course, the same goes for the other tone. If you take this one off, you'll just hear one tone on one side. But when you're listening to them both at the same time, your brain starts to make up that difference. If you play the tones through a stereo system, if you were listening in your car, if you were listening to it, on your phone or something like that, and you're not using headphones, it's going to mix. The waves are mixing, but your brain doesn't have to make up the difference because you're hearing it. So that's why it doesn't work if you're not using headphones. All right. So you're going to hear the sound, but just because you're hearing the sound, your brain's not making up that difference. Frequency following response. If it wasn't for our brain's frequency following response, listening to binaural beats would just be an interesting listen. But once the brain starts to generate the difference between the two tones, the binaural beat, then your brain starts to mimic or follow the wave that you've selected to listen to. This is also called brainwave entrainment. I've seen some people use entertainment. It's just entrainment. You're entraining the brain. It's following that beat that you created. So in this case, the 5 hertz is the difference, and that falls into the theta range, I believe. If you go up to, well, you can see it on your screen, but if you go into theta, it's 4 to 8 hertz, about there. Some of these ranges are a little different depending on what website you're looking at. So they're just in general, ranges. So that would be about theta, that 5 hertz. So your brain would start to make the 5 hertz sound, and then your brain would start to follow and go into theta, the theta frequency and amplitude, basically, of the waves. So if you're really stressed out and want to meditate, you can listen to binaural beats in the alpha, theta, or delta range. Some binaural beat tracks will take you through many different stages, so it goes very slowly into the deep, relaxed state, just to ease you in. Other people choose to listen to binaural beats in the gamma state for working on assignments for work or school. Some use binaural beat tracks to get into lucid dreams while sleeping. As I mentioned, lucid dreams are in the gamma state. So, what can be some dangers of binaural beats? Though the majority of people can engage in binaural beat therapy without any issues, those with neurological or cardiac issues should be cautious. Seizures. If you're prone to seizures, you should be wary or contact a healthcare professional concerning it. Be mindful that if you were thinking about using binaural beat therapy for your children, they are more susceptible to seizures than adults are. Irregular heartbeats. Changing your brain waves can also affect your heart rhythm. If you have heart problems or wear a pacemaker, you should consult a healthcare professional before attempting binaural beat therapy. Drug side effects. It's not recommended to take drugs that might negatively affect you at the same time as using binaural beat therapy, as you don't know what kind of side effects could occur, and if you go into one of the more relaxed brainwave states, you won't be thinking as clearly if you need to deal with side effect issues. Don't operate heavy machinery. Using binaural beat therapy can get you into the lower states of consciousness. It lowers your ability to think clearly. You wouldn't want to be as out of it as you are when you're in a deep state of sleep, and at the same time be driving on the road at 60 miles per hour, among other people driving at 60 miles per hour, even higher. You don't know what influence they're under, and you don't want to be under a bad influence either. Don't use before going or during cognition required activities. So if you think you need to think clearly about something in order to perform it, a task such as cooking, handling hot items, you can burn yourself, going to court, these are life decisions, school or work, etc., then you shouldn't be using binaural beat therapy right before doing those things or during them. Pregnancy. It's not recommended to use binaural beat therapy while pregnant. Children are more susceptible to seizures, and a baby's heart could be affected from the change of frequencies going on with the mother's body. Psychological disorders. If you have a psychological disorder, you may want to consult a healthcare professional first. Some people with bipolar disorder experienced problems and needed to stop using binaural beat therapy. The theta brainwave has to do with feeling raw emotions, and that can be very therapeutic if these raw emotions are coming up into your mind, but it can also be too much for someone who's currently working on those issues even without the use of binaural beat therapy. So I kind of wanted to discuss this, with everybody out there who's listening to binaural beats. They may be trying to solve problems. They might be really wanting to work on an issue such as fear of speaking, or worried about their being self-conscious, worried about how other people perceive them and things like that. And what's going on whenever you go into a state of sleep is I think you're contacting that, well, obviously you're the unconscious, the subconscious is coming out in symbols and things like that. I've related that in my article about are we spirits playing games on Earth, basically. If you were in, from the Christian perspective, where Paul says that we are currently seated in heavenly places, and then what is this? What is this life? And I think it is just sort of us being in this other state where we're peering into this life like a game. We're hooking into it like a game, like avatars. So you can see my article on that for more about that. But basically, I think when we go to sleep, we are connecting with God. We're connecting with the source, etc. We're connecting with our true selves, the higher self, whatever you want to call it, your spirit. We're connecting with that, and that has a higher perspective than we do when we're in these bodies. It wants us to work out these issues. If we're going to be pure as God is pure, we need to work on our issues, and that's what this life is for, basically, I think. We're here to be able to create and things like that too, but we are supposed to be purifying ourselves while we're here. That's the best way to work things out. This means that when we slip into our subconscious or, a deep state of sleep, this really low frequency, brainwave frequency, that we're connecting with what is trying to purify us, basically. If you have a lot of issues going on and at nighttime you have nightmares, that's a sign that you're supposed to be working on something that you haven't worked through yet. This is the same sort of thing. You're playing around with the same sort of thing. If you go into these lower states of brainwaves, then you are connecting to this source that wants to purify you. You want to be a better you, etc. But it's going to bring up these raw emotions and these things that you need to work on. So if you have things that you're working on and you're just, maybe that you want to work on, but you've been ignoring it in your daytime life, and now you're going to try to use this to solve your problem, it's not like a cure-all. You still have to go through the emotions. We're not just, there's no way to get through this without just actually dealing with our emotions. This is sort of one of those things where it's kind of like self-help. You're trying to get yourself all pure, and you can't skip something, your higher self or God or however you want to think about it knows what's best for you. So just go with it, right? But it might bring up things that you're not ready to deal with if you haven't. It's kind of like you're forcing yourself to deal with issues that you weren't dealing with in your waking life, but now you want to deal with them when you're, doing these binaural beat therapies. It's great. It's great therapy for you. But just understand that, if you've got something going on, this might increase it. What I like to call it is kind of turning up the fire on the lake of fire. It's there to purify you so that you can come out shining like gold, but it's going to burn off the dross, so you can see my video on the lake of fire and all that stuff. So continuing on here, just saying psychological disorders, pay attention to yourself. Listening too much. People have discussed feeling effects of binaural beats after they've listened to binaural beat tracks. One example would be listening to a track for lucid dreaming before going to bed, then take it off, go to bed, and then having a lucid dream that night. In this case of lucid dreaming, you might think that you need to listen to the track while you are asleep in order to start the lucid dream, to become lucid. But in this case, the person did not need to be listening at that exact moment. This shows you don't need to be listening to the binaural beats continuously to keep feeling the effects further on. So I used to lucid dream. I never used anything to, start my lucid dreams. I'm sure that you can, but you don't need to, as long as you are sort of programming yourself to become more lucid and get into that state of thinking more clearly, etc. I'm glad you're enjoying it. You sort of were the person that led me to do this. I wanted to be able to discuss the side effects in case anybody, was listening to it without understanding how it worked. So thank you for that. Co-creation. So we all come together for the betterment of everybody else. All right, so I talked about how you can feel the effects after you're using the binaural beats. So you don't have to be continuously using it. At the beginning of this article, I pointed out that each stage is beneficial. You don't want to always be in a restful state of mind if you have lots of projects that you need to handle. And you don't want to be constantly thinking and figuring things out in your mind, like thinking too much, when it's time to go to bed, when it's time to sleep. Our bodies can handle switching through the various states by themselves. But today we have cognitive overload compared to just 100 years ago. We've got lots of frequencies from, our TVs, the radios, Bluetooth, etc. Lots of frequencies are all around us. I know the 5G thing rolling out, etc., etc. HARP. There's all sorts of frequencies out there. And we could just let it be. As long as we were meditating and things like that, you could just do this yourself. I believe that. But sometimes people can use a little bit of help. So that's what I'm talking about here. When using binaural beat therapy, pay attention to how it affects you personally. Below I'll list the various states and what can happen if you have too much of one state or too little. When you listen to binaural beats, pay attention to see if you're having any of the symptoms of being in one state for too long, and take breaks if needed. The recommended listening time is up to 90 minutes, once a day or every other day. But pay attention to how you react to it and use it less or stop completely if you experience any negative effects. And Roshi and Funkhauser, let me know how much you use it. I know you said you were using it so much. So what is the time frame that you've been using it? How often, etc.? Welcome to see, happy to see Truth Unleashed here. It's an interesting thing I was led to just because stuff had happened in my life, and then I sort of got led into focusing on meditation, making a meditation track for myself, because I wanted to use a subliminal meditation for myself in order to focus on positives rather than negatives. So that's what led me to making the meditation video that I did. And I saw somebody else mention binaural beats, and I wanted to see, can I figure out how to make a binaural beat track? Well, it figures out I can make a binaural beat track. I learned how to do it. So I may do a video about how to make your own also. But yeah, I just basically, this channel is for me sharing my experiences, what I'm looking at, how I'm going through things, etc. So this was the next thing that I was led to, because I was just curious to see if I could, and I can. So that's cool. So I might be making more in the future. I hope to. So I'll get back to this. When using binaural beat therapy, oh yeah, I said this, pay attention to how it affects you personally. So just make sure that you're not in one of the states for too long. As I mentioned, we need each state. Each state is beneficial. All right, continue on. The pros and cons of the 5 brainwaves. So the more frequent one is gamma waves. The frequency of gamma waves are about 30 to 60 cycles per second. They can be higher. Some people reach 250 megahertz. There was a study on Tibetan monks meditating, and some of the monks produced gamma wave activity more powerful and of higher amplitude than any previously reported in a healthy person in the neuroscience literature. Lucid dreamers were studied and found to hit about 50 hertz while lucid. When we sleep, we go into the delta state, the lowest frequency waves, but when we start to dream, we become lucid, or start to dream and become lucid, aware that we're dreaming when we're inside of the dream. Then our brain waves become higher and more frequent than they usually are during our awake life. This is the gamma state. Now, some people reach this gamma state while creatively solving a problem that's been bothering them. But it's interesting that people might be able to reach that state more while dreaming than while awake, and through lucid dreaming at nighttime. This is the state where we become amazing problem solvers and can think clearly and effectively. You can have great memory, recall, or hit transcendental states of being. That would be the Tibetan monks meditating. You can process more information or stimuli in this state too. We're usually in beta while awake, not gamma, but when inspiration strikes, you might be hitting gamma. Some people listen to gamma binaural beats to study, or while they're working on a project that's been bothering them. According to the study, the aha moment, the cognitive neuroscience of insight, led by John Kunios at Drexel University and Mark Beeman at Northwestern University, gamma waves are positively correlated with aha insight moments. Too much gamma. If you're in the gamma state too long, you might start thinking too much. So you may become stressed out, anxious, highly aroused, overly stimulated, as you're able to process more information than normal. It's funny, when I was a child and I had a lucid dream. I don't remember what made me think this, but I was standing in the middle of a street and I was looking out in front of me and I said 360. I wanted to see 360 degrees all around me, and I was able to do that. I was able to see 360 degrees all around me. However, I had information overload and I woke up from my dream. So that's kind of what this is going on. If you have too much information, you might even just come out of that gamma state. It's probably what happened. I was probably hitting a gamma state when I was dreaming and it woke me up. Oftentimes, if you become lucid, you start to perceive things more and it's kind of a shock to you, and you can pop out of your dream like that, just too much information. You become more efficient at staying in a lucid dream the more you practice at it. And what I did is I would rub my hands, I don't know why, focusing, I guess, on one thing and not focusing on everything was what helped to keep me inside of the dream without waking up. It probably has to do with this whole perceiving too much information at one time. Our brains can get overloaded with too much stimuli. So if you were, working on a project, you might go, like, if you're overly stressed, overly working on a project, constantly thinking about things, you might think this, your brain's, firing, going off on different tangents, etc. And you're just thinking too much. And maybe you didn't solve the problem yet, and then you go home and you're just constantly thinking. You've been in the whole too much gamma place right there. So let's see here. Too little gamma, if you're not reaching it often, as you can see, it's the highest state. If you're not reaching it that often, which we don't really hit it, we're usually in beta, but if you're not reaching it too much, you might not be as creative as solving problems, or have learning disabilities in order not understanding things that maybe other people are understanding. You might not be as aware of your surroundings or relationship interactions with other people. You might not be as attentive to all these different stimuli. Roshi and Funkhauser, like, how many, would you listen to it for 90 minutes a day, every day, or would you listen to less, or would you listen to it every other day, etc.? Just curious about that. And yes, like headache and sickness, it's too much stimuli, I think. And so that's why we need to pay attention to that. 3 hours, that's interesting. I guess some people do listen to it at night. Also, is that at night? Okay, well, that's good information. Continuing on here. Let's see here. Too little gamma, I talked about that. So beta waves, we'll move on to the next one. This is the one that we're in most of the time. The frequency of beta waves are about 14 to 30 cycles a second. This is where we are generally throughout the day, responding to outside stimuli. This is an alert and engaged state of mind. So the highest one is the gamma, and then we're coming down to beta, the higher end of beta, 23 to 30. You might be engaged in a new experience or exciting situation where you're taking in everything all around you, or you might be solving a more difficult problem that requires a highly complex and/or creative solution. The lower end of beta, 14 to 22 hertz, you would be actively thinking about a general problem and searching for a solution, or having intellectual discussions with people, such as right now. You might use a beta binaural beat meditation to start your morning to get your mind moving out of the groggy waking up phase. Too much beta. If you're in beta too much of the time, you might be stressed out, overly stimulated, with an inability to relax, thinking too much, overanalyzing things, and you may experience some health problems such as hypertension, increased heart rate, increased blood flow, cortisone production, and glucose consumption. This should also probably be in too much of gamma also. You'd probably reach that if you had too much gamma. Too little of beta. If you're not reaching beta enough, you may have an inability to focus, ADHD, not be able to think clearly. You might be groggy or daydreaming or inattentive, etc. That's because as the lower we go down on these brain waves, the less thinking you are. So that's why you're not going to be as attentive to stimuli. Okay, alpha waves. Alpha waves are slower than beta waves and higher in amplitude. The frequency of alpha waves are about 9 to 13 cycles a second. This is the state you'll find yourself in if you've just completed a task and then you sit down to relax, such as pulling out a phone to look at while you're sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic, or resting after cleaning the house. When someone starts to meditate, they will usually be in this state first. This state is a good state to think about affirmations or do some visualizations, the daydreaming part. Alpha wave binaural beats could be used before bed, or perhaps when you take a break to meditate or just calm down after some excitement that got you a bit stressed out. Too much alpha. If you're in alpha too much of the time, you might be overly relaxed and daydreaming a lot. You might not be able to think clearly or stay focused on what it is that you want to accomplish. Too little alpha. If you're not reaching alpha, you may have a lot of stress, overthinking, anxiety, OCD, or insomnia. Okay, theta waves. Theta waves are even greater amplitude and slower frequency than alpha waves. The frequency of theta waves are about 4 to 8 cycles a second. This is more meditative or daydreaming state, which leads to great inspiration. This is the state you may end up in when you are driving and experience highway hypnosis or zone out in general. You may come up with creative ideas or solutions to problems in this state, perhaps while driving, running, taking a shower, etc. Those sorts of tasks can be so routine to you that you mentally disengage from them and enter into the meditative trance state. In this state, you may be more highly suggestible, which makes it good for subliminal message meditations. Here you can reprogram yourself while listening to affirmations. Theta can be induced in light sleep, hypnosis, and sensory deprivation tanks. Theta wave binaural beats would be good before bed, but would not be appropriate for starting your day if you have things that you need to do. Too much theta. If you're in theta too much, it can lead to depression, inattentiveness, or hyperactivity, impulsivity, and ADHD. Too little theta. If you're not reaching theta, you may have anxiety, poor emotional awareness, and stress. So again, theta is the place where you would be dealing with those raw emotions and things like that, which is good, but some people don't reach there and they don't deal with them. Somebody who's worried or stressed out might be stuck in the higher brain waves most of the time and maybe just not spending too much time in the lower ones. Kind of like if you go to bed, then you have a bunch of nightmares and you wake up and you can't sleep, etc., because you're not dealing with your issues perhaps. And it's not letting you get into that relaxed state so that you can deal with those issues throughout your dreams. Dreams can help you to deal with those issues, to figure out what they are, and emotionally or subliminally deal with issues. I think that's how we connect to heaven, to God, to source, to higher self, whatever it is that you want to think of it. So we need to be able to get into these lower states in order to get emotional and physical healing. So some people just don't do that when they go to sleep. They don't get into these lower states, or they don't meditate enough, etc. So the majority of people are constantly in the higher states thinking too much, etc., where we need to get into these lower states to actually get the healing that we need. All right, delta waves. Delta waves become the greatest amplitude and the slowest waves. The frequency of delta waves are 4 or less cycles a second. This is the state we get into when we fall into a deep sleep. They never go down to 0 cycles a second because that would mean you were brain dead, but they are usually around 2 to 3 cycles per second. Experienced meditators have been known to reach the state through meditation. These waves are found more often in babies and children. As adults, we tend to spend less time in delta. This is the best state for healing the body. When people want to meditate, they might find it hard to quiet their mind. Extra thoughts can cause stress on the body. In the delta state, you won't have that constant flow of thought, so the body can rest and repair itself. Adequate production of delta waves at night help us feel refreshed from a great night's sleep. Today, often we have many different frequencies around us and we don't reach as deep of a sleep as we should. This is why some people will unplug their Wi-Fi, unplug their TVs, etc., so that they can have less frequencies around them, put their phone into another room or something like that too. All right, if you're constantly waking up at night, you might not be getting as much delta wave sleep as someone else. A delta binaural beat during sleep can help you get relaxed so your body can heal itself. Obviously, you wouldn't listen to a delta binaural beat when getting ready to start your day because you're just not going to be thinking clearly. You don't want to be listening to delta while driving a car, etc. It's kind of like sleep driving. You don't want to be in those lower states. According to Mind Motivations, a very skilled hypnotist who can take the client into delta is able to perform such phenomena as using hypnosis as a replacement for anesthesia during various medical surgery. And this has been documented on numerous occasions, medically and scientifically. So your body can heal itself. It knows how to deal with pain, etc. And so the delta state is good for that. But you're not going to be thinking. You're not going to be using your mind, etc. It's kind of like your mind's, the processing is getting shut off and you're going into the delta state. You're not going to be having as many dreams or intensive dreams, etc. at this state because the dreams are using your brain. It's the frequencies are going higher. It's the gamma frequency for lucid dreams, right? So delta is a deep sleep where you're not thinking. And that's where the healing can take place for your body, emotionally and physically. Too much delta. If you're in delta wave too long, it's associated with learning disabilities, brain injuries, and an inability to think, reason, or solve problems. Too little delta. If you're not getting enough delta, you're not going to be able to have a relaxed sleep, and the brain has a hard time to repair itself, so you may end up with health issues. You may end up with a muddled mind because you're not letting your brain rest, which is why when people don't sleep with insomnia, they find it harder to think clearly. Conclusion. Binaural beats can help you reach states of consciousness to help heal your body, mind, or be able to concentrate and become a better problem solver. You can also reprogram your brain with affirmations through subliminal meditations, along with binaural beat track. So long as you pay attention to how you feel, binaural beats can be very helpful in training your brain. So I'm going to leave this article in the description box. It's already there. And I'll put the link in the chat room so you guys can see it. So it's very interesting. I'm not sure what I'll do with it, but it's interesting. We can help to heal our bodies. Like I said, I think the body would naturally do these things itself, but people get too stressed out in general today, especially in the US, where they don't allow themselves to get into a lower frequency. So, they're thinking a lot, they're stuck in the beta a lot. And then they go home and they just turn on the TV and pop into alpha. And, they might not, alpha is, you're highly suggestible. And so there's a lot of stuff on TV that's getting into you and suggesting ways for you to think. It's better for you to meditate on things that you want to think rather than letting other people program you themselves, etc. So, Roshi and Funkhauser, what kind of binaural beats do you use in the morning? Which ones do you focus on? It's very interesting. I listened to the one I made that was in the theta, and it's funny. It's just, I actually just kept doing stuff. But basically what happened is I was in a state where I saw something in my life, and I would have normally considered it bad. But I did that video about, bouncing back from bad. I take my own advice. And so I was trying to ask myself, what is good about this and all that stuff, and focus on something else. So my focusing on something else led me to doing the meditation track. And it was an interesting couple of days. I noticed that after listening to the meditation track the first day is I worked on the meditation track. I created it, put some subliminal messages in it for myself. There aren't subliminal messages on the one I uploaded, but you can add them for yourself if you want to. But anyway, I did a track for myself, and I listened to that night, and then I went to sleep. And the next day, I was in a much more meditative state. I was much more relaxed than I was the day beforehand. And that would have been really bad if I really had to work on something. So I did notice, I took a break. I didn't listen to it the next day. But it was really, really good for me to be in a more meditative, relaxed state of mind on the next day. I was so much more going with the flow and reading the book that I talked about. I did a video on the surrender experiment, and I was just going with the flow and seeing where life was going to lead me. And I'm happy. I really liked the meditation track I made. And that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the thing that I would have normally considered bad. So that's what I'm saying. There's positives in every single situation, even if you don't think you can see it there originally. So it definitely helped, but I did take a break. I listened to it a little bit last night, but not the whole track. And this morning I felt more like I did get rest last night. So that was good. I think maybe if I make another one, I'll make it more gradual and maybe dip into a lower frequency for sleep, for more repair during sleep or something like that maybe. But I will go with the flow and see what life brings, what I'll be working on next. But I found it very enjoyable working on it. So yeah. Do you guys have any questions or thoughts or anything you guys want to talk about? Trying to think. I know this isn't more of a Christian or religious or whatever you want to call it, spiritual conversation, except that you can train your brain to think differently. And some people do have these experiences. I mean, I've had a back and forth with lucid dreaming. I used to lucid dream as a child. I haven't for a while, but it's because I haven't been trying, really. I know what I need to do in order to start lucid dreaming because I know what worked for me in the past. If I wanted to start lucid dreaming, I could do it, and I could do it without binaural beats. What's interesting to me is the idea of getting back into lucid dreaming. I wasn't sure if I should or not, and I think at the time I shouldn't have. I didn't know what to do with it, and right now I'm not even sure what I would do with it. But when you're in the dream state, you have this ability to connect to your brain in ways that you can't, when you're awake, I think. It's kind of programming your subconscious. And in the movie Inception, they talked about it, where if you get into somebody else's dream, you can plant a thought into their mind. And then when they're awake, they think that they had that thought themselves. And that's what subliminals are all about, basically, planting thoughts into your mind. And then you start to see the fruit in your normal day life. So if you were dreaming and become lucid, you might be able to plant a good thought and have that grow in your life even better because you're reaching the subconscious in ways that you might not be able to. And I think it's really interesting. You might be able to train your brain to get into a higher state. Thoughts I'm thinking about, being able to release resistance, to see yourself as the you that you want to be. Visualizations probably would work really well in a lucid dream in order to become better at what you want to be better at, basically. Weaponized binaural beats, I'm not sure. I mean, some channels could maybe do that, but I don't think that they would. Are you thinking like somebody would plant negative subconscious things there? I know I watched a video recently, which maybe I'll get the link below, where there's this guy talking about the frequencies and using these frequencies being used as weapons. I don't know that they were binaural beats, but they were weaponized frequencies. But I mean, I've talked about that with the TV and everything. There's frequencies on TV that get you into a different state of mind. I watched one movie recently, I'm trying to remember, I think it was Limitless. I think it was Limitless. And I noticed the soundtrack had a lot of sound that people might use in binaural beat videos, meditation videos. It was very like a meditation track almost. I found that very interesting. The people might know these things, but I think that whatever can be used for bad can be used for good. And I don't just mean like a movie. A movie, the way you perceive a movie has to do with what spirit is in your body. I've perceived songs and movies in a very positive light when I was in a good frequency. And then I went into a negative frequency and I perceived the exact same things in a bad light. And so I think that if there's frequencies around us, I'm not worried about 5G, for one thing. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are worried about 5G, and I'm like, I think as long as we are purifying ourselves and becoming one with God, or getting aligned with Source, however you want to see it, nothing is going to negatively affect us. I think that everything is for our purification, and if we're having some sort of negative feelings or responses, it's a sign that we need to work on something personally. So I think that if you're waking up unable to breathe, something is going on during the night. What it is, I don't know. I think that when in the nighttime we're connecting to Source or God or however you want to say it, and we're dealing with things in our subconscious, and I don't always know what the meaning is. I had a bad dream one day, about a week or so ago, week or two, I forget which Sabbath it was, but whichever week, I think it was last week, and I had a bad dream, and then I thought, I want to talk about fear. And it led to me doing a Sabbath live chat about what is the fear of the Lord. And I know that many good things came out of my bad dream. Whatever is considered bad, we have to ask ourselves, how is this good for me? What am I learning? What is this teaching me? What is the benefit? Where's the silver lining, etc., which I talked about in my bouncing back from bad video. And our perception of something as bad is what is leading to a reality where it's bad. Our perception that something is good for us is leading to a reality where it's good for us. Our perception actually is changing our reality. So, it's really interesting. I am so focused on everything working out for the best that everything always works out for the best. I might not even understand it consciously. So the thing is, I'm not going to be afraid of other people using frequencies and trying to manipulate you, because nobody has any power over you. We have all the power. I did a video, an article about how we are free with the law of attraction and all that stuff. We're completely free. And whatever is bad, sometimes it's just that it's the path of least resistance that's coming into our life. It might be a wake-up sign that we need to deal with an issue. It might be teaching us something. In my case, the bad dream led me to doing a great video because I'd prayed the night before, hey, I want to know what I should do a video on, and so I got a bad dream, but that was how I discussed fearing the Lord and what does that mean. So everything is always working out for us, and I truly believe that. So I don't really see anything as negative anymore. Of course, I did my video about there's no such thing as evil. Everything bad leads to something good. It teaches us things. It's sometimes the path of least resistance. If it wasn't for the bad thing that led to the stuff this week, I wouldn't have done my video about bouncing back from bad that people might enjoy and actually be helped by. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have started working on the meditation track. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have done this video about binaural beats, about what they are and how they work, etc. If it wasn't for this stuff, all this other good stuff would not have happened. And the bad thing was the path of least resistance to get me to what I do want. And so we have to understand what we think of as bad. It's only bad because we think it's bad, basically. So we need to change our perspectives and ask, how is this benefiting me? How is this good for me? Whenever we think of something as bad, how is this working out for me? And then it will work out for you. You will understand, hey, this really was working out for me. Hey, this really was good for me. This was teaching me something. A bad dream can bring to mind something that you need to work on. As I talked about, these things might bring up raw emotions, but it just means it's something that you need to work on. It's something that's it's a sign that there's resistance in some cases. So if you are having, negative issues and insomnia and things like that, that's a sign that something is going on, that you need to deal with something. And however you deal with it, and sometimes binaural beats might be the path of least resistance for you to work out your issues. If you listen to a meditation track, if you're trying to plant new affirmations in your mind, etc., if you're doing all this stuff, that might be the path of least resistance to get to where you want. So I just think I'm not going to be worried about other people trying to harm us. I think that everything works out for our best, and we have all control. And so if there's something negative that we think negative in our life, it's because, and you can see stuff about the Essene mirrors on my channel, on the Greg Braden and things like that. Here, I'll type in Greg Braden. If I can type his name in there. And so what we judge in other people, he talks about that. What is in our reality is a mirror of us. It's a mirror of who we are right now. It's a mirror of what we're judging. It's a mirror of what we think we've lost. It's a mirror of, what we really love and we thought we lost. It's a mirror of how we perceive our mother and father, etc. And so this is an interesting article. He's got interesting things about the Essene mirrors. But everything that's in our life is really a reflection of who we are inside. It's like, he calls it the divine matrix or holographic universe. If you have a hologram and you rip it in half, the very interesting thing is those two halves have the whole hologram inside of them. And you can rip one in half. Now you've got quarters. The two quarters have the whole universe inside of them. It's got the whole picture inside of them. This world, we've all got the universe inside of us like that. It's like a hologram. And what's inside of us is coming out in our world, and that's what we're seeing. It's a reflection of who we are inside. So if we deal with who we are inside, our world will reflect the new who we are inside. It's the changing of our perspective. And if we can see everything was always working out for us, everything will always work out for us. And that's why I want to be planting these good subconscious thoughts, because what we plant inside of us is how our world is. If you think, I can't make enough money doing what I love, you've got that seed inside of you. And I have articles about planting, affirmations and things like that, planting subconscious thoughts. And it's like a seed in your garden of your subconscious mind. And if you plant the seed that I can't make enough money doing what I love, then you can't. But if you can take that out and plant a seed of, I can make enough money doing what I love, I can even make a lot of money doing what I love, then if that's what you really start to believe in your subconscious, it's what shows up in your world. So it's what you truly believe, and it's about your faith in knowing that that's what can happen. And so a lot of people, they don't have faith that they can make a lot of money doing what they love. They think that, you can't do that. Like Christians think you're not supposed to make money in this life. It's only in the afterlife. And I've got a video about how that's not true also. Because Joseph, he did God's will and he made a lot of money. He ended up being, the ruler over a bunch of people. And people kept throwing things at him, prizes, gifts, etc. So your faith is what allows that to happen in your life. How much faith you have in it is what allows it to grow. And it's It's very interesting. I did a video about a rave guy who he saw demons when he was doing his set. I don't know if it's still on my channel or not. But I actually did do a video about that, and he was saying that, you know, he was creating these sort of, or allowing these demons, spirits, to interact with the people that were listening to the music. I believe everything is good and bad depending on your perspective of it. So some people had a negative perspective of it. I think of it now as egregores, and you can have positive egregores or negative egregores. And what I want is positive, more positive ones in the world than negative ones, you know. I want healing for the world. And I think that there are some very positive things that can come out of it. Yeah, I used to be very judgmental and saying it's all negative, but I think there's positive ways. I think there's positive ways to use music, and positive ways to get into the flow. And yeah, when you're in that zone, it's a zone. It's like being in the flow, etc. MJ as in Michael Jackson. Is that what you mean? If you're in the zone or zoning out or whatever, it's getting into one of those states of mind. It's marijuana. Well, I've talked about that meditative states on my channel. There's a video I did. Let me see here. This is my Meditation for Dummies article where I did post a bunch of different videos. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong. I don't know why this went to the wrong article. Just hold on a second. Meditation for Dummies. I'm trying to load the thing. There's a video on here where it's on my channel too, but this is the easiest way I know how to get to it. The path of least resistance. Okay, I did this part here, meditation versus intoxication. I think it is better to get into the meditative state without the use of binaural beats, without the use of drugs, etc. That being said, there's nothing wrong with using something else to get you into that state. I just like the idea of not being addicted to using something else, so that once you are in the middle of something, let's say, there's actually in the book of the Surrender Experiment, he's about to, he got charged, he could have gone to jail, etc., the author. He knows he didn't do it, but, you know, it didn't look good. And I was thinking, you know, if he just ended up in jail, he'd be able to meditate, and you can be free in jail. I've talked about that before in my Being Free article, but freedom is a state of mind. When you feel free in your mind, you're not going to be stuck in a situation where you feel locked up. But you can see things in different perspectives that way. Anyway, basically, if you were stuck in jail, you wouldn't have access to, you know, drugs. I also talked about ayahuasca and other things. If you were stuck in jail, you wouldn't have access to those things. I want to be able to get to a point, and I want everybody to be able to get to a point where they can just meditate and not use something else to get them to that meditation state. That's the end goal. However, some people will use them in addition to it, and that's fine if it's a path for them to, it might be the path of least resistance to get to where you want. But you also don't want to be addicted to using something like ayahuasca, where that's the only way you can get into the state of being, and then as soon as you're done getting into that state of being, and then the drugs wear off, and you're out there in the real world, and you see contrast. My throat's getting scratchy, sorry. If you get out into the real world and you see contrast, you don't want to have to be addicted to a drug to get you out of it. I want you to be able to interact with contrast, what is something you would call negative, and understand that there's really nothing to be upset about, so that you can get into the positive feeling through faith that it's already been answered. So that's probably true. I'm sorry. Some jails might have more drugs than the street, right? But let's say solitary confinement, you can't get it or something, right? Some people use drugs to stop thinking. And so, like I said, you can see this video, Meditation versus Intoxication and Finding Alignment. I guess I'll leave the link below for this article if you want to look at that. I just don't want people to try to find alignment through drugs, because you're not going to. You need to be able to let go of seeing things as bad. And a lot of people use drugs to let go, and then they come out of it, and then they're still seeing things as negative. And sometimes it's actually a lot worse, and that's why they get addicted. There's no need to be addicted to these things. If you can find alignment, become one with God without the use of medication, then you're not going to become addicted to it. And it might further your advancement, but it's not the end all. The end result is coming to a state of mind where you can see contrast, see something that you would call bad, and you would see, this is leading me to solve this issue. I have faith that if the universe has allowed me to see this negative thing, that I can create the positive. Have faith that it's already been answered. Your prayers are already answered. Become one with God and see things through His perspective where it's already been answered. And then you won't see that thing as bad. You'll see it as a good, because it led you to further expansion, to creating more, to praying for solutions. And those solutions already came. And you're one with God and seeing things through His perspective where there's no such thing as bad. There's no such thing as evil. So that's the state of mind where you want to be, because when you can get into that state of mind, you're not going to want to use drugs to make you feel better. You're not going to get addicted to it. It might be the path of least resistance to get to where you want to go, but the end result is that you're not going to need medication in order to do any of that. You're going to be able to just meditate. Because once you can see things and not be upset at this world ever, you're going to be able to meditate. You're not going to have resistance. You're going to be good at releasing resistance, etc. And you're not going to need any of this. Once you get to that point, then the thinking mind isn't going to have such a hard time thinking anymore. With the brain waves, you're going to be able to go into theta and delta meditation, because your mind isn't constantly thinking about things that you're worried about, because there's not going to be anything to worry about. So that's the point. You're not going to need to use drugs. It might be the path of least resistance for somebody in the future to get to where they want to be, but you don't want to rely on drugs. You want to be in a place where you can meditate and not need drugs in order to do so. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. Are there any questions or comments, thoughts, anything you want to bring up before I end the video? I hope you all have enjoyed this video. I'm just waiting to see if there's any other things. Yeah. Every single thing in our body is a reflection of something we need to deal with, and I know I've got pain. I'm not saying that, you should beat yourself up for having pain or something. And sometimes it's just something that we might have called into our existence in order to move on to the future. Whatever is negative in our life, it's caused us to ask for more. And the asking for more is what we're here for. And so we're learning. So a lot of things that we deal with are also just teaching us stuff, and that's a good thing. Okay, so I might end this video, and I hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you all for listening. I do have one binaural beat track on my channel right now if you want to listen to it. Yeah, I watched the Joe Rogan, I listened to the Joe Rogan podcast with the Wim Hof thing, but I just listened to like half of it or less than half of it, just a portion of it, and I'm not sure what to think about it all, but if he's able to control his body, you know, it sounds beneficial for him. But I don't really know enough about it to actually do a video on it or discuss it very clearly. As you can see, I don't really know what to say about it. Thank you all. I'm glad you all are here. Have a great weekend. Shabbat Shalom. And yeah, I'll see you again later. Bye.